Hello and welcome to a buildingSMART webinar. This webinar is part of the buildingSMART Virtual Summit for Spring 2022. Thank you for joining us today. My name is John Proctor and I will be your moderator today. Details of today's webinar are on the screen. This is the second session from the building room. We will be hearing from David Ivey, the co-chair of the building room with Rob Roof, on a recap of the room activities and the outlook for the year ahead. Then we will have presentations on a number of projects, Spatial Zone update from Gianluca Genova, fire safety engineering from Asim Siddiqui and Enrico Ronchi, and then we will have building energy model, project updates and activities to finalize that particular activity from Jeff Ouellette. If you have any questions, please raise them in the comments button on the right-hand side. Before I hand over to our speakers, I'd like to remind you that your phone lines will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. We will take the questions that people raise by using the comments box at the end of the presentations. I'd also like to bring to your attention the information that is on the screen now, that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider but are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. Okay, excellent. I'm going to hand over to David and I will add your slides into the stream, David. Please go ahead.
Okay, you seeing everything and hearing me okay?
We are indeed.
Great. Okay, welcome to session 2 of the Spring Summit for 2022. My name is David Ivey. I co-chair the building room with Rob Roof. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to just kind of run through a few kind of standard things that we like to talk about at some point during each summit. A little bit about BSI process and some of the projects we're working on, and some of our needs, and just a little bit behind the work. So we'll dip out of the slides for a little bit and look at some of the BSI website as well. I stole a few slides from Richard Kelly presentation that I thought were really important. One of the things that we talk a lot about, or that you hear us talk a lot about, is the BSI process and kind of what is it and why is it important. And it's really kind of the process by which we engage with the larger community. And so really what we're talking about when we talk about the community is obviously everybody who's in buildingSMART International, but also any of the vendors whose products we use, reaching out to them, looking for use cases for projects that we can bring into not just the building room, but really any of the rooms that are part of buildingSMART, so that we can kind of rate these, bring these in, find out where we have kind of fertile ground for processes and projects that we can work on, and bring those into the buildingSMART process, and then kind of have a dialogue about that. It goes through the steering committee and through the executive committee, and finally, approving these things, whether they be, amendments to IFC or an MVD or whatever it may be. Those projects kind of go through. Every project goes through this process, and I really liked this slide mainly because it starts to, I think, address a lot of the interesting aspects of all the different things that we have going on in the building room. And you see some overlaps here, right here, let's say between, the building and the airport, and we have like a life safety project. And, this is just kind of one example, but you really could kind of draw these circles in a lot of different ways because there's a lot of overlap everywhere. So I think from the perspective of getting involved with buildingSMART and finding out what we're doing, really doesn't matter what industry you're in or where your interests lie, because there's going to be something that affects you directly, and probably others as well. This is just a little bit about the FM handover and operations asset handover that we're working on currently in the building room. And I say we, but it's not me. There's a team of people working on it. And the presentations from BR1 yesterday were excellent, and they covered all of the FM work that we're doing right now. So if you're interested or have a chance, you should go back and look at the recording for that particular presentation. I'm going to dip out of this particular window for a minute and stop sharing that and dip into another window here.
Yep, there we go.
You got that? Okay, so I'm over at the BSI .org, buildingsmart.org website, and here you can find really a rundown of all the details of everything that I just talked about in terms of process. So, the buildingSMART process we talked a little bit about, but basically what you're doing is you're submitting an activity proposal. So you can come right here to the site and you can, read instructions for it and create an activity proposal. And then there's a detailed project plan that gets made, and I think there's instructions for everybody here. And then the big part, and we'll talk about it a little more in a second, is sponsorship. And I think it's really one of the most important aspects of any project. It's like coming up with a great idea is great. Having a great team to work on it is great. Getting it implemented is great, but we really need sponsorship in order to be able to make the project run. Most all of the people who are working on these projects are doing it pro bono. And so the money is used to help facilitate time on the project so that we can get them done, and getting vendor buy-in as well. So it's a huge part of what we do. And everybody hates to ask for money, but these things benefit everyone. So it's really money well spent. And then there's some engagement and governance, right? So the process, like I said earlier, goes through several different, I don't want to call them quality control, but reviews and everything, so that we find anything that's a problem, send them back, and go through kind of a recursive process where we look at things, make little changes, comes back through the process, and finally goes through to get approval. And you can click and get involved, and there's all kinds of get involved links all over the BSI website. So we're really looking for people to get involved, get on a project team, get in a room committee, get on a project, whatever it might be. So here's a little bit of the building room activities. As I mentioned, we were doing a lot of FM handover and equipment maintenance stuff, and those are from the presentation yesterday. Also, occupant movement analysis is something that we're working on. So you see that these are both here in development, and then we've also got some that have been done in the past that are still going, right? So the building room roadmap, which we'll kind of look at quickly, is really out in version 1, and then there's stuff that's already reached approval for other projects. So, I mentioned a little bit about the building room and our purpose, right? And so this kind of core mission statement is to basically bring open standards to the built environment. And it's really as simple as that. I mean, the idea that we all need to be able to talk to each other, and that's a large part of what buildingSMART is trying to do, is give us a vehicle through IFC and other tools to be able to talk to the various applications and programs and processes that we use. And this is just a look at our steering committee. We're from all over the world. And we meet monthly and talk about our projects, try to kind of chart the course, figure out where we're going for the year, what we've done, and make sure that the BSI processes are all being followed. And basically we just have a few key objectives, which are true of probably most of the rooms, but some of the bigger ones, asset management, exchange of information, is obviously very important to buildings, especially on the back end. This is the latest version of our roadmap, which you can find on the BSI website, and it's stored over in Box. And I won't go through this in great detail, but we'll just kind of zip through. And the roadmap is basically kind of a document that encapsulates a lot of what I'm talking about right now. Really talks about what the building room is for, sort of our goals in there, our mission statement, if you will, what we do in the building room, our charter, right, which is basically what we're tasked with doing, and a little bit more about the committee, and then you'll find slides in there for the process and the way that we're working in use cases. So really, it's just, in written word and written form, all of these disparate things that we're talking about just in this little beginning blurb that you can find on various parts of the website, but really brought together into a single document, so that if you really wanted to get a feeling for what the building room is all about, you could come and download the roadmap, read through it, and really have a good, solid sense of what we're doing, what value it brings, what projects we're working on, and a single page summary of a graphical nature that shows kind of the building room, et cetera. So that's our roadmap. And if you go and you look at it and you think, oh, this doesn't seem right, or I'd like to add something, or reach out to someone on the steering committee and engage us and talk about it with us. We can, it's a living document, so we don't expect it to never change. And these are just this is just another way of looking at some of the room activities. So you can come to buildingSMART here, and you can really filter by any of the rooms. I just filtered by our building room here. So all of this stuff is building room work that we've been doing over the last few years. And so you can come into this and get a sense of what's going on in the building room. If you want to get a little more detail, you can go down and look for particular documents. So here's the approved IFC4 precast. It's a final standard, and you can go to the document and read all the details about that there as well. And then, just to recap what's going to be happening this week, or what has happened this week. So we had BR1 yesterday. We have BR3 tomorrow. So the FM handover and the FM and Open BIM presentations were both excellent. So you can watch them eventually once we've wrapped the summit for the week. Today, we'll be talking about the Spatial Zone, fire safety, and the BEM with Mirbeck and Jeff. So that'll all be recorded as well. And then tomorrow, we'll have the use of BIM and the energy performance stuff, and our BIM framework and the ARISE project for competences. So all of this stuff coming up tomorrow. And then we'll wrap on Friday with a little bit of closing plenary. And I just want to, again, point out that there are a lot of ways to get involved. The forum, the buildingSMART forum is one of them. You can come to the buildingSMART page and join the forum right here. It's a good way to get involved and be able to discuss anything really with anyone who happens to be in the forum. So a good start and a good segue into getting more involved with buildingSMART. And then there's some more get involved slides, but I did want to go back just quickly here to the other slide deck. So obviously, we're calling for participation all the time, but again, funding is important, and this is just kind of a snapshot of where we're at with funding, in the various rooms for the various projects. So, you see that one of the things that is important is getting more green in these the donuts here. So I think if you know of someone who's interested, or maybe a vendor that's interested, that we've got some overlap with our projects, and you think they might be interested in it, doesn't take a lot of money to get involved, but it's something that will help the projects, especially during development and initiation. I just liked his slide. That was a life safety engineering one, but that's it. That's all I wanted to cover. Just kind of a 30,000-foot view of a few things before we get on to the more interesting presentations.
That's great. Thank you, David. Really good to see the overview of the building room activities. Thank you for that. We're going to go to second item on the agenda. Then I'm going to invite Gianluca to join us, and we're going to have an update on the Spatial Zone project.
Here we are. Hello, everyone. I will now share my screen so that you can see it. Please tell me, John, if it's working.
Just adding it in. There you go.
So seems like it's not stable. It's weird.
Orange, yeah.
Let me see if I switch the slide. Oh yeah, now seems good.
That seems
okay.
Good.
Hello everyone. Now adding on David, I will actually give you will try to give you an update on actually one of the building room ongoing project, which is called Spatial Zone, and I would like to give you, after 1.5 years of working time, just a midterm review and just will show what are our findings so far and how it's going, and of course try to also show what we are working on, and if of course you show any interest, give you also the opportunity to join or onboard onto our team. So let's go ahead. First of all, a bit background on our main core team. Yoshi Adachi was the initiator of this whole idea. He was the main driver. Then I joined him to also enforce this project, and now we are a team of almost 15 people working intensively on this project since 1.5 years. My name is Gianluca Genova. I am head of Digital Innovation Laboratory at a company called Baslen Hoffmann, and also a steering committee member in Building Room, and also acting as a project manager in this particular Spatial Zone project. Today, I brought you several topics. One of I would like to, for those who never heard about our project, of course, give our project overview, give a bit of details about objectives and deliverables that we are aiming to fulfill until the end of this project, and also for those already know a bit, given a midterm results review to show where we are at the stage and where we are heading. So I will also complete that with the project timetable for 2022. So first of all, for the project overview, to bit history, this particular project group, of course, is called IFC Spatial Zone. It's focusing on a particular class which is already existing. This is an existing concept of IFC scheme. But of course, we are also trying to tackle different spatial definition in the IFC scheme and try to understand and try to encourage the particular use of a IFC spatial zone. All we know, the IFC space is one of the classes that all of us are everyday using. IFC zone is also one of the well-known classes. IFC spatial zone was introduced with IFC 4 scheme, and particularly our goal as a group is, in one hand, take the ideology behind the spatial zone, push it further, and try to explore different use cases. In one hand, also recognizing the limitation of existing softwares or BEM author tools, and the result provide a guideline to encourage the software to implement functions that actually allows us to implement then these use cases. So, and that's why we have a one-way goal of exploring and trying to understand what this class can be used for, and one way also facilitate and try to make it feasible also in technical perspective for the public users. So this slide is actually a slide which goes back, I think, for the Corona time where we were. We actually started this whole journey in Tokyo Summit, where Yoshi first time presented the concept of spatial zone and trying to understand it, trying to explain the necessity of this class, not particularly the class, but the use case of the class that can transform our industry. Then we continued other summits where we still could meet physically with this topic. We had activity proposal. Then we transformed the project to be from a standard to a technical report for the building industry, and then we wrote a technical report proposal this January 2022 that was submitted. You can actually access from the same link that David just showed you. If you just go there to IFC Spatial Zone, you can download the technical report proposal, and you can read more in detail if you're interested. At the moment, we are actually at the executing stage. We are trying to fulfill certain tasks that we need to fulfill to fill this our technical report. So, and I will particularly show you the findings from this last 3 months and not go back to the old historical part, which I already presented in the last summit. So for the objectives, we slightly changed some things, but we didn't in particular change our main goal. One is, of course, raise awareness of the spatial zone and why such special zone definitions are needed in context of IFC, OpenBeam. Also, what are the particular use cases of this class. How can we implement this kind of zones and which types it's required. So that's why we are also suggesting, when it's necessary, also additional types for a spatial zone and additional use cases, trying to pull this out. And if we see any limitation in all the buildingSMART certified software that actually makes it hard to implement a spatial zone in everyday usage, we also would like to provide a guideline to the software vendors. That's why we are really closely collaborating also with software vendors in order to develop this kind of implementation potential applications in the tools. And of course, what we want to encourage is to integrate more and more the spatial zone mindset, iterate more with spatial concepts around the open BIM idea, and integrate them in really early design stage, so that we can actually not just have a better data structuring of the spatial definitions, but also use this to optimize or do better designs in our everyday job. All deliverables are, of course, a technical report, which has these use cases, types, and guidelines, but also we would like to also support our use cases with some sample models to show the users how the spatial zones can look like. And we are planning to share these models and through GitHub. We are really active there too. And also, once we have this whole list and we have a wonderful use case management platform, which in buildingSMART already we are using, we would like to also introduce most of these use cases, at least some of them which we think are really strongly and really scalable, also would like to publish here in this use case management platform. So now, for those who already are familiar with the project, I would like to give an evaluation results and midterm review from our project. So far, we were thinking in the beginning of this project, okay, how can we kind of handle this different application of IFC Spatial Zone, since IFC Spatial Zone is like a kind of zone which is really abstract in the definition, but also can be implemented in different ways. In order to handle these different use cases, we said, in order to not just make a list of random use cases, we said we first maybe should cluster them in certain application. And then by different discussion workshop, first time there were 7, then they came 8, then they come 6, and then finally we end up with 5 main clusters where we thought will cover more or less most of the IFC use case, spatial zone use cases. And these are spatial coordination reservation purpose, spatial definition declaration purpose of using IFC spatial zone, as using it as a spatial regulation validation purpose, or as a message, as a spatial driven a message or information, or using IFC spatial zone as a spatial boundary for analysis and computation. So these are the clusters. I will now show you a bit more in detail what I mean with these individual clusters and what use cases can we see under them. So the first one is coordination reservation. It's actually really self-explanatory. So using a certain space within the building in order to reserve it for a better coordination, or reserve a certain place in order to allow certain functions to be established in the building. For example, we can use a maintenance reserving, a space reservation, where we say, for this particular equipment, we also need this space in order to keep it free for the maintenance, or it has to be considered or defined as a maintenance space. We can use, for example, IFC spatial zone. We can also give any function within a different space definition as a subspace give a function. For example, this is a resting corner, this is a cleaning corner, or this part of the building is used for this particular function. It can be also used for clearance limit when you think more outside the building, more in infrastructure area. For example, the clearance limit for an equipment, for a vehicle, for the clearance for a train which passed through, or a clearance limit required a kinetic movable component to operate, like a well. All this area can be also defined as a spatial zone. This can be either temporary purposes, like just for that particular phase of the project or building, can be just reserved temporarily, but it could be also a permanent definition for the coordination, where we say, okay, this space is used for MEP, this place is used for this kind of particular function, or this part of the construction site is used for material equipment, or this part should be reserved for certain safety or security purposes. This kind of things are the first category. It's more space management relevant. The other is more spatial definition declaration. This is more when you want to give a name to a certain area volume that you cannot, with the existing IFC scheme, cannot manage. For example, we can call rooms, we can give zone names, but we cannot, for example, call the space required for a tree, or in an industrial kitchen, we cannot differentiate where the cleaning or where the cooking area is, because in IFC space, we will just call the whole kitchen as one space. But in functional management or facility management aspect requires more subdivisions. And this can be, again, with the special definition aspect. I think landscape architects or design will be happy to hear that actually there is a way to actually identify different areas and different part also of the landscape design. For example, we can do the zoning of the flora, or one other example, we have this particular example of the tree. A tree is just not a tree. A tree has a zone that has to be reserved for the roots to grow. There is a tree shading place where it can be calculated for the circulation or resting places, and there's also a tree itself which has to be cleared so that actually it can grow. This can be also alphanumerically defined with IFC spatial zones, by also contributing to urban planning. Also in the right picture, you see, for example, different definitions of spaces that are not particularly defined by boundary, but more particularly defined by the future or the characteristic of that space of the urban city, or partially has a border to a street. For urban planners, they can describe that place, but in OpenBeam, in order to describe it, we need some classes, and IFC spatial zone can be also a key to this kind of application. Regulation validation is another application where we can use it for building codes, restriction, or city planning regulation. For example, as a regulation information model, we can use IFC spatial zone again to actually define everything as what is required to give a building permit, for example. This has a permanent character. Let's speed up a bit. The spatial regulation and validation, I think that's wrong. That was supposed to be spatial message and information. The title is wrong. It's the application where we use a spatial zone as a communication purpose, where I say, we know we have a BCF, we can assign the BCF to a space, but maybe that particle message has also needs a certain clearly defined zone or space. It can be a room, it can be a walking path where we want to communicate with. It can be a message to the facility management. So it's kind of in combination with BCF to empower more clear what is about. So this is also a temporary character. And the last one is also the interesting one, using spatial boundary for analysis and computation purposes. So for example, if you want to analyze a building in a certain, for simulation, for any quantification, for any measurement, we can take a zone, a boundary, a volume, and can define it as a spatial zone to analyze a particular building. It can be the model which we require for run XCFD simulation. It can be a model that we run to make a certain measurement, volumetric measurements for certain functions. But also, it can be interestingly used for the computation purposes. For example, when we want to run an automated algorithm to model generation, if you want a mobile robot or any kind of machine navigate in the building, we have to give him a boundary, a frame where it's allowed to compute. And when we program something, we need to define this boundary by the program itself. But another way of thinking is make the boundary really flexible as a spatial zone and make the algorithm adjustable to that particular zone, so that actually we can just play with the zones in order to use the same algorithm, and we can scale it. So that's also an interesting application of IFC spatial zone, which more and more we are using in every day. And these are the particular types that are then also we already have in the existing IFC spatial zone schema. These are the construction, fire safety, lighting, and security. For those, we already have types. In the latest release of IFC 4.3, there were some adjustments, some additions to this. Some other additions like flora, fauna, circulation couldn't manage to get into the schema, but of course, we would also try to also increase this different types for the next release, and also bring this as a suggestion again to the community for further application IFC. So then what we also did in order to understand the particular usage of IFC spatial zone in the industry, we initiated a industry survey. In this survey, we asked particularly different expert users, software vendors about their IF Spatial Zone usage and their experience. There were questions like, what is the BEM software, or which model domain discipline you are using as space reservation most often, or how does your BEM authoring tools perform in different particular spatial executions or operations. Most of the users that so far joined were super users. That's also one of our target group. We also have software vendors, which are a second big target group. Of course, the experts and industry experts are also very welcome. But of course, I don't want to show you all the results because I want you also make you curious to read our technical report. That's why also I will just bring some of the graphics. For example, one of the exciting one was the particular usage of IF Spatial Zone actually really correlate with these clusters that we were thinking, and that was also one of the driver how we define the clusters. And of course, since this questionnaire is still ongoing, I would like to also everyone who is also joining and listening at the moment this presentation to participate in this questionnaire. So we would like to run this questionnaire till end of May. So that's why we will have then the end result be part of the technical report as a result. That will be publicly available to all of you. John already published in the commentary the link. If you would like to participate, I would be really happy if you can do so. And then, yeah, that's we will really appreciate if you can participate. Just for the project timetable, so that we look at the time. We are here at the stage where we define the use cases. We are applying the questionnaire, and by the end of May, we will start in June getting all the results of interviews with the software vendors, and put them together in technical report by June and August, so most in summertime. And our goal is that we make a pre-publishment and a presentation the next summit, where we actually show or present our technical report with all our findings, and validate this technical report also with an expert panel, so that actually we can final publish and make it available to the community. So that is to the project timetable. Just before I close up, I would like to also show our team. So it's not just me. Of course, I'm the mostly one who presents the results, but as I said, we are a big team, a core team of 8 people that always are there in every meeting, but also guests and other experts that are joining. And you are most welcome. If you would like to join, please send me an email. We need more experts. It's a group of experts, of architects, MEP engineers, structural engineers, software vendors, and yeah, we would be happy if you can also be part of this interesting project. Thank you very much. And yeah, if you have any further question or request, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm more than happy also to answer your question later on in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Gianluca. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. I wonder if it's worth taking them now. There's a question that's come in from Agron. It's on the screen now, which I think David Delgado Vandral has also partly answered, or perhaps fully answered. Agron says, will the spatial zone have an IFC relation to an entity? For example, that needed the working area around a heat pump, or are we talking about 2 different aspects with no relation?
Yeah, no, that particular use case is also one of the already presented under the cluster reservation. So that's exactly what we are trying to tackle in this group. We want to also cover all the possible spatial use cases, and even if it's not the solution IFC Spatial Zone and something else, still we will also target this point.
Okay, that's great. And one other question that came in from Christian. Thank you, Christian. What if you want to reserve a virtual space, for example, for a security camera view or a smoke entry below a smoke detector?
That's a really solid use case. We would be more than happy to discuss this with Christian further in detail. And of course, that's, I think, also a particular use case that we can also consider for IF Spatial Zone application.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for dealing with those questions now, Gianluca, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
We will go back to our agenda, just check on where we are, and I'll remove that question. We have, as you can see, fire safety engineering, call for participation next. That is, we're going to be hearing from Asim Siddiqui at the University of Greenwich and Enrico Ronchi. I see we also have Peter Lawrence. Here we go.
My name is Asim Siddiqui. I'm a research fellow working for the Fire Safety Engineering Group FSEG at the University of Greenwich, UK. This presentation is about fire safety engineering call for sponsorship. Why fire safety engineering is so important? Well, the data inconsistencies due to incorrect or missing information not only have serious implications on project costs and time, but from the fire safety perspective, also an increased risk to life. This is why the need for a golden thread of information for fire safety through the BEM digital data flow approach was identified as critical in the post-Grenfell disaster review report by Hackett. Also, the International Fire Safety Standards IFSS Coalition Decade of Action for Fire Safety 2022-2032 calls for a new framework to support audits, compliance check, and global standards. From the fire safety perspective, currently there are a number of challenges. For instance, frequent data loss between the design and review stages, lack of open and standard tools to connect the BIM workflow. So to address these issues effectively, improvement to the standards, but also a streamlined data workflow approach is needed. The purpose of this project is to ensure the IFC standard meets the common needs of fire safety engineering. It aims to incorporate fire safety definition into the IFC standard to maintain design and analysis data at all stages in an open, connected, digital workflow. The idea is to deliver several improvements. For instance, improved gathering of input data requirements to conduct performance-based fire safety analysis with a focus on fire modeling, capturing of key simulation results in the IFC model, developing an open source add-in to achieve two-way data flow between BIM authoring tools and fire and evacuation modeling tools. This proposed project is mainly focused on the fire modeling aspects of fire safety engineering and is related to a couple of other buildingSMART projects. The first one is the Occupant Movement Analysis OMA project, which is part of the building room. The OMA project is currently in progress and is about developing an MVD for circulation analysis and evacuation analysis. The second one is the Regulatory Information Requirement RIR project, which is part of the regulatory room. The RIR project is currently looking for sponsors and is about ensuring that the IFC standard meets the common needs for building regulation. Several incidents in recent years have highlighted the fire safety problems. The Hackett report has recommended that a golden thread of information should be introduced to keep track of building safety information during all stages in the life cycle. Also, the IFSS Coalition has called for a decade of action to address fire safety issues through global standards. In the OMA project, we are trying to add the required evacuation and circulation analysis information to the IFC standard. However, from the fire modeling perspective of fire safety engineering, the development of an MVD is still awaiting. Fire safety engineering has moved slowly as compared to other disciplines in adopting BEM. However, there is a growing global interest in digitalization and in terms of digital compliance checking. Fire safety is becoming a key area. So it's an opportunity to influence and harmonize with the standards and practices that will impact building design and fire safety engineering globally. Also, it helps you to prepare for the inevitable standards and process changes brought about by digitalization, driven both by the governments and state-of-the-art research to make the building industry safer, greener, more streamlined, and more cost-effective. The development of an MVD for fire safety engineering, as well as the development of an add-in to demonstrate two-way data sharing between BEM authoring tools and the modeling tools will enable a standardized and connected workflow for the practitioners. This will lead to skills and tools portability and interoperability, smart compliance checking, and through live assurance of building safety through change, occupancy, usage, and refurbishment, and move towards a plug-and-play BIM environment for diverse modeling support capabilities, starting with fire safety, but extending to other areas. For stakeholders such as regulators, fire engineers, owners, clients, builders, and consultancy firms, there are several benefits. For instance, digital audit trail, information relating to the fire safety processes, including records of inputs, outputs, and assumptions, compliance checking, so access to full information on FSC data to facilitate automated compliance checking, informed decision making, preserves and tracks the information relating to the association between the FSC and the building's design throughout the design process and life cycle, automation, development of enhanced software tools to manage the FSC processes and smart building capabilities, and safety. Sure, all stakeholders understand the logic relating to the fire safety design. In a relatively recent journal paper by the University of Greenwich, limitations in the IFC model to support fire safety engineering analysis data related to fire and evacuation modeling were highlighted and how they can be addressed. The IFC model issues related to evacuation analysis aspects of fire safety engineering, as highlighted in this paper, are getting addressed in BSI's MVD for Occupant Movement Analysis project. As part of the OMA project, in addition to evacuation analysis, circulation analysis is also covered. So this collaboration project has partners from the University of Greenwich, the Technical University of Munich, Accurate, Autodesk, IST, and the Lab University of Applied Sciences. The project is progressing well, and as part of phase 1 of this project, process maps have been produced and initial data exchange requirements have been identified. The work will continue on the next phase, where detailed data exchange requirements will be produced and the support in the current IFC schema will be reviewed. Several aspects of the OMA project will feed into the proposed fire safety engineering project that will focus on fire modeling. Now my colleague Enrico will talk about the development work on a prototype add-in at Lund University.
My name is Enrico Ronchi, and I'm an associate professor at Lund University in Sweden, specifically at the Department of Fire Safety Engineering, and I will talk briefly about what we are doing, what we're building on. We're working on a two-way data sharing prototype add-in for evacuation simulations and BEM tools like, for instance, Revit. So the idea here is that you have a BEM model to begin with. In this example, we have been working in this prototype with Revit, and you are able to edit parameters so that you can directly use those BEM files for generating evacuation simulations. So you will export this through an IFC format and then get it into an evacuation simulation. And the simulator that we're using so far is called Pathfinder. It's a commercial tool developed by Thunderbird Engineering, but the idea is that we will standardize this workflow so that it could be used with almost any evacuation simulations tool out there on the market. So you're basically then able to use the Revit model exported through an IFC format into an evacuation simulation tool, and then after you run your simulations, you will have your results directly translated again into IFC and imported back into Revit, so back into a BEM tool, and this will mean that you can visualize your results directly within Revit, so you will not have to go again through the evacuation simulation tool. And when you're doing your design, then again you can use the IFC format to decide if you need to update some properties or something in your design of the building that you're working with. For instance, if you find out that it does not comply from a fire safety engineering standpoint. And again, the loop will continue, because once you have done some changes in the properties, including your geometric layout or any other property that is used by evacuation simulations, then you will be able to re-export it and then restart this loop. So restart working with the simulators. So the idea here is that we want to optimize the workflow and avoid to have too many tools that you will have to work at the same time in an independent way, but instead having BEM as a central hub where all the information is stored regardless of which simulator you are using.
Thanks, Enrico. Now I'm going to talk about how you can participate in this project. Well, you can participate in two ways. The first way is by sponsoring the project. You can provide funds for the project and receive various benefits, which I will cover on the next slide. The second way is the agreement to participate. So you can become part of the project team and contribute in kind. And this option is for those who are unable to provide financial sponsorship. Now, this proposed 3-year project has two key components. The first component will focus on the data definition, processes, and standards. This is expected to be completed in 2 years. And will deliver an MVD for FSC, mainly focusing on the fire modeling. The other component will focus on developing an add-in for data sharing between BEM authoring tools and fire and evacuation modeling tools. This is expected to be completed in 3 years and will deliver an open source add-in for two-way data sharing between BEM authoring tools and fire and evacuation modeling tools. The ideal total funding we are seeking for this work is 250k euros. We welcome contributions from multiple organizations towards this amount we are seeking. For sponsors of this project, there are several benefits. For instance, the sponsors will get free membership of BSI for 3 months. They will have regular engagement with the project team. They will be able to influence the work on the data exchange and processes requirements as part of the MVD development, add-in development, testing with modeling tools, etc. They will be at the forefront of meeting the needs of industry and authorities. So there are several benefits. for those who can sponsor this project. If you wish to participate in this project, then please send an email to contact@buildingsmart.org. The project has the University of Greenwich, UK and Lund University, Sweden as academic partners. Also, as far as the industry partners are concerned, several companies have shown interest in supporting this project. For instance, Autodesk, Foster & Partners, OFR Consultants, and VIB. We hope you have found this proposed project interesting and are willing to support it. We'll end this presentation here. Thank you for your time.
That's great. Thank you very much, Asim and Enrico. Just a reminder, the point that Asim finished the presentation on, the fire safety engineering project, which is a sister project from the occupant movement analysis project, which has been running for a few years now, is seeking active participation from people. So if you feel like you would be able to contribute and you would like to get involved, then please contact us at buildingSMART. And we're obviously also actively looking for funding for that project, so that it can deliver some of the deliverables that Asim and Enrico set out. So please contact us if you are able to offer that as well. I see Jeff is about to join us. Please come back to the screen, Jeff. Welcome. I think you're going to give us an update on building energy management.
Building energy modeling, yeah. So thanks, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So I'm here to give an update on this project that has been going on for a while. And I would like to say that we're reaching the end. So here we go. Grab this. Okay. So just go over a project summary, what the results are to date, and what the next steps are. For those of you who may not be familiar, this project started out as trying to figure out a model view definition for building energy modeling at the end of a project or end of project design. But when we started to look at the scope of the project and what was going on, we began to realize that not enough time, not enough effort had been put into sort of figuring out if this was the direction to go. It had a very limited scope. It was dealing with one particular piece of software or two particular pieces of software. And so we stepped back for a moment and said, okay, what we should do first is sort of set up a roadmap and a baseline in which to decide how to move forward. And that's where this idea of a IDM development report, it's not an IDM in and of itself. It's more of a roadmap, or we could even call it an Uber IDM that says, okay, well, within this idea of BIM and BEM data exchange, what are the opportunities for data exchange, and what do they look like in higher level terms, and then how do we begin to then approach those solutions? So it's about trying to address the interoperability issue. It's not trying to solve building energy modeling issues. It's not trying to solve, all the BIM issues related to building energy modeling. So I'm happy to announce that the version 1.1 is now complete. It's ready for BSI governance review. I've submitted a copy to John as the project coordinator for the building room so that it can make its way through the rest of the governance process. And then we can decide on the publication and public consumption. So what does that mean? Well, the report itself is pretty extensive. The idea is that it's trying to sort of create a baseline for how to understand the concept of data exchange between BIM and building energy modeling. What are all the challenges that are involved with that? What are all the ways that this effort has been tackled before? And then looking at this idea of, what does that overall application of building energy modeling look like to an entire life cycle of a project? And what are the potential opportunities for BIM and building energy modeling exchanges? And then there's one of the final chapters, really recommendations on how to move forward. And then there's a bunch of supplementary material that are referenced in the report. And, I think, as I said before, the intent is so that we have a consensus on what that baseline is. A lot of times what's happened in the past is you'll have a particular topic. The topic might be very broad and have multiple instances where solutions can be found. And then you'll have parallel developments, and they'll sort of keep rewriting that background information or ground truth to either the knowledge of whatever that particular set of people who are working on that solution are, or, there's no relationship to the other parallel developments. So what we're trying to do here essentially is similar to what David Ivey was talking to at the beginning of this larger building room roadmap, is to look at a roadmap just for this idea of building energy modeling and BIM, and making sure that there's a consistency between all of these interoperability projects as such, because we're trying to tackle that data exchange over the entire life cycle of a project, and that includes lots of different requirements, because there's lots of different types of simulation analyses and requirements for that simulation analyses. And also laying forth, who are all the stakeholders, what are those roles, what are all the potential technologies and standards and things that are used, so that we don't really leave anything up to chance, or that couldn't be discovered and brought to the table. So we reframed this project in terms of a couple of different phases. First phase was actually the first version of the report, which then went through an expert panel review, and that occurred mainly in 2021, first half of 2021. The result of that was then to take all of that input from the expert panel and make the appropriate revisions to the report before making that report fully public. One of the things that we hadn't tackled yet, and I think is now sort of one of the next steps, is this idea of, planning for phase 2, and phase 2 being the actual development of these IDM and MVDs for the exchanges. And those can happen in parallel. They don't have to be sequential. They should be very quick. There's a lot of tools now that buildingSMART is providing with the use case management tool, with the development of other standards that hopefully can make the turnaround of these exchanges happen more quickly. But I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done at the individual IDM and exchange level to really pull together the details of those exchange requirements and what those processes look like. And so one of the proposals, the best way to manage that is through establishing a working group that can then move this project forward. So as I said before, we went through the process of creating the first version of the report, and then we had an expert panel review that report and give us feedback. And the result was we had over 350 comments from the reviewers. We had about 25 different panel members, and we ended up with about 9 different comment logs that were returned with all of these comments. And this essentially, it was a lot of work, because with all of the revisions and trying to decide, with all the comments and the feedback, a big part of this was trying to decide, what was applicable as an actual revision to the report versus, what was something that we can add to a supplementary commentary that we'll be publishing next. That is good insight and information from the reviewer, but didn't necessarily impact the information that was necessary to put into the report. It might have been outside of the scope of the report, or it might have been, good supplemental information. But in making that decision during the revision process, the report went from about 89 pages to 112 pages. So yes, it has taken a while to do the revision, and this is one of the reasons why. But again, there was a lot of really, what the reviewers did, what the expert panel did, was bring a lot of good information to the table, especially about precedent efforts, about background materials and research that had been going on prior to the creation of the report, but also even during the creation of the report. It helped us, sort of get a better picture of everything that is going on, which I think essentially makes this report better as a baseline than it was before. And I really appreciate that feedback from the expert panel. I'm not a subject matter expert. I have my expertise on the BIM side of things and from an architectural design point of view. But this obviously was also a learning experience for me, and having that input and managing that input from the subject matter experts was really appreciated. So, we expanded a lot of the problem statement chapter. I think a lot of this too was clarifying what the goals of this report were, because I think there was, you could tell from some of the comments, there was sort of confusion about, well, why we're writing this, because in some ways, some of the subject matter experts on the expert panel felt like, well, we already know how to do this. We're just going to do it this particular way. We think it should be done this particular way. And I think a problem with that is you have to step back and say, well, trying to be prescriptive, absolutely prescriptive in that way, doesn't necessarily always work. That you have to step back and take a bigger picture view of these things, because one particular solution might be right to, one or two or a small group of subject matter experts, but it may not be appropriate or right for all markets, all projects, everywhere, all tools and everything. And, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create a consensus that says, well, we can develop standards or even guidelines, if not, total standards, that address this need for having this interoperability and make it work in multiple ways. There's not just one way of doing it. Is how can we accommodate the different ways of doing it? At the same time, too, we are also expanded the possible exchange opportunities to deal with recommissioning. Originally, we had sort of left recommissioning out because we thought it might be too much more to add, but really not so. And I think it fits in here and makes the report better as well. And then I think there's still, as I said before, the struggle between the idealistic and pragmatic relates to those comments I made before, and what people say it should work like versus what it probably is. The most practical ways for things to work out, I think, are different. Not that you should throw out the idealistic. Those should obviously guide what you try to do pragmatically. And you should always, as we try to do in the BIM world, is try to change the business practices and the culture and everything in order to really make use of BIM. But, we want to move this forward and move forward in today's environment. And again, not focusing on solving all the problems of building energy modeling in BIM, but trying to set up, solving the interoperability issues. So, the results is there's a lot of technology and methodologies out there to do building energy modeling. When we talk about building energy modeling, we're talking about the use of energy in a building for the purposes of lighting and occupancy comfort, heating and cooling and operations of all the equipment and everything like that. And that building energy modeling, simulation, and analysis has many different ways of being accomplished. The methods that are used, the applications that are used, the core simulation engines that are used, there's a great deal of variety there. And In some cases, it's very easy to focus on one or two particular tools and methodologies. But the fact of the matter is multiple tools and methodologies are used around the world. And so it kind of makes this idea of developing a standard more daunting. But I think, again, if you go back and say, well, the scope is figuring out the interoperability, how do I get the needed information from the BIM side of things to the BEM side of things? I think that helps out a lot more and can really then not sort of touch that third rail of, well, which is the best way of doing it on the building energy modeling side. Say, what we should be focusing on is what is the best set of information that can be transferred from BIM to BEM and possibly back to make the most of those processes. And so, you know, this includes a lot of different stakeholders, and those stakeholders' roles may change over time. Depends on the types of projects. There's a huge diversity of projects which this can be applied to. And, you know, and frankly, there's also, as much of the building industry is in general, there's an inconsistency in regulatory oversight and standards and requirements. Not that there aren't none, but they're not always applied equally across all projects and markets, if they're applied at all, to be honest. You know, in some cases, you know, they're not even considered, which is, I know, you know, in everybody's minds, they think, well, this is kind of ridiculous considering the era that we live in, and we talk so much about sustainability and all that. But there are still a lot of cases where, you know, this idea of sustainability and green and efficiency and all that, hey, as long as you meet the building code, that's all we care. And that's it. And you know, how do we transcend that beyond it's beyond the scope of this particular project. But we're trying to figure out what are the best case scenarios in which, if it's available, how do we take care of that problem? And there's a lot of factors here, you know, we realize that are both large and small. They may be, those influences may be particular to a particular market or case or project type, but they also might, in a sense, be universal, and they apply anywhere and any time. So as I said before, you know, one of the things we try to do is identify the possible uses of BEM in the lifetime, building energy modeling in the life cycle of a project. Originally, we came up with 11, and there's these opportunities for those exchanges between the BIM systems and the BEM systems as a part of the same process, right? We're still talking about the BIM process, but we're talking about building energy modeling being one of those analysis processes within BIM. You have the structural analysis, simulation, and design. You have the building energy modeling, and outside you can have all of these other things, and in many ways they're connected, and is focusing on this particular process. And as I said before, one of the things that we added was the idea of how does recommissioning fit in there? What are the requirements that when you say, you know, I have a facility that's been in use, now I want to consider it's retrofitting, or sometimes known as, you know, also known as recommissioning or refurbishment. So what are the steps that I need to take? What is the information that I need in order for that to occur? And what is the information that could come from the BIM process in order to make that happen? So as I said before, you know, the idea is to establish this ground truth, is to make sure that all of these exchange efforts, all these interoperability efforts are operating from the same baseline. And that way you're not trying to rewrite history, or not trying to rewrite the background every single time. Because once you have that established, and I think, you know, this quote of "a problem well put is half solved," I think is very much true in this case. You have to sort of set aside a lot of singular points of view, saying, well, that's the right way to go, and instead say, okay, well, I have to recognize these other points of view and understand the validity of them, and then start to create that atmosphere, which is, okay, well, then how do we address all of these different very valid points of view and still move forward and do the right things at the highest level, and begin to attack these lower level necessities of information exchange. And, you know, it's not easy, you know, in moving that forward. But But the next steps, now that we have this version of the report, is to move it through the BSI governance structure. So the building room steering committee will have the opportunity to now look at this and go over it, go before the standards committee or the standards committee executive to have the review. If there's any changes that need to be made, then make those quick final revisions, and then publish this to the BSI standards library as a report. We want to begin then opening up the discussion on the BSI forums, but also look at the next phase. And so, as I said before, is this phase 2 is really looking at, how to plan to move these interoperability developments forward. You're looking at 12 possible data exchanges, and how are they funded, how are they managed, who's tackling them, how do they move forward. And I think a key part of this is establishing this idea of a building energy modeling working group, whether it's within the building room or within even the new sustainability energy room, or it's a sort of a cross-room working group, which is something I've proposed before for asset management, because it involves a lot of players from a lot of different places. And so the idea is that it's topic focused. It's saying, okay, how do we manage this? And the idea, the role of that building energy modeling group or working group is to figure out with the report and all the proposed exchanges, what's the priorities? What may be the low-hanging fruit? What are the things that we can tackle right away very quickly and get the most out of? Can we identify sponsors and participants and managers for all these different projects? If we want to tackle this very quickly and in an agile method, can we identify all the resources necessary in order to do that? And I think that's important. And then going ahead with the actual development. And I think, it's important, again, to realize that coming up with solutions isn't necessarily going to be easy. And that's why I think this report was important to establish as a baseline, was to recognize all of these challenges and variances and differences between marketplaces, geographic regions, national regions. Even within those, there may be differences in the jurisdictions, to understand the differences between project delivery methods, to understand whether it's from a legal standpoint or a contractual standpoint within just a project, to understand the differences even between project types, and how they're applied. And then, but still using the BSI process to come up with those consensus solutions, which is really ultimately important. And I think it's, the unique opportunity that you have within a buildingSMART environment is to then work with other partners. So, people that we're working with in the expert panel included USGBC, and GBCI, the Green Building Council International, working with people from the Department of Energy in the US, working from IBPSA, the International Building the International Building Performance Simulation Association, and its different chapters, trying to get all of this input and recognizing that these other partners, these other groups might have insight and opportunities to collaborate in order to create these solutions. And I think that's really important. I think the other thing is that while we immediately go to this idea of IFC being the solution, it's not necessarily the singular solution if there are other open standards that can be used. And I think, we see that with our relationship with OGC and trying to tackle GIS and BIM, is that in some ways the opportunities in the GIS world of their standards might apply better to certain exchanges or certain processes. So I think it's important for that to be looked at, and we recognize those, and we list those in the report as well. So, again, I say, what we're hoping for is this idea of bringing all of these experts together, bringing all of these organizations together, bringing these stakeholders together, and begin to work in this context of generating a consensus environment, consensus solutions, and really working as a team to move this forward. It's difficult because very easily what you don't want it to devolve into, and sometimes it does, is as we like to refer to in the US, is the cage match, the free-for-all in wrestling, where everybody gets in and the last person standing is the winner. That's not the right way to do things. This is not the mission, the goal of buildingSMART. We really want people to understand each other, to talk to each other, and then realize that with a bunch of individuals, if we act together, we can come up with solutions that work very well for everyone. So that's where we're at. If you've got any questions, be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jeff. Excellent presentation as always. Thank you for your update on BEM and the next steps. We do have one comment that came in from Christian during the session. He was interested in the types of energy that are being modelled in the BEM work and report.
Yeah, I saw that comment. I think I answered it. Is really about the building, is about the usage of energy by the building in its process of operation. So, for lighting, for heating and cooling, all of the different systems that might be using energy, and then how do we quantify that? How can we simulate and predict it during the design process? How can we analyze it and leverage it during the operations of a building? With IoT and all of those kinds of things.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for making that clear, and thanks to Christian for the question. We have no other questions on any of the presentations at this point in time. I see that David Delgado Vondrel has been in discussion with Sergey Muhich and on Spatial Zone, so I won't go over that conversation, but it's there in the comments area if anyone wishes to read it. And we will. It looks like the Spatial Zone project team will be reaching out to Sergey for some to see if he wants to provide some input to the project, which is great. So it just remains for me to thank our presenters today. Thank you to David for hosting and setting the scene on the building room and the many projects that are taking place within the building room. Thank you to our speakers today, Gianluca on the Spatial Zone, Asim and Enrico on fire safety engineering, and Jeff on building energy modelling. It was an excellent session. We have a further session, BR3, tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, UK time. And we will looking forward to seeing you there. And there are still plenty of room sessions in the agenda, both tomorrow and Friday morning. So look forward to seeing people at those sessions. Thanks for your attendance today. Goodbye.